you said that you took German in high school, correct?
Yep. Yes.
And if I remember correctly, the teacher said, I'll give you a passing grade, just never come to class again. Is that true?
No, not exactly. She actually doesn't have the authority to give me a passing grade in Australia in final year. That's not how it works. Like you
Uh,
get marked entirely separately by a whole she's not allowed to grade us. Um, so she didn't say that she would let me pass the what we call the higher school certificate, which is final year. She just said, I'm not going to report you to the school for what we call wagging, or sometimes called jigging, skipping.
uh,
Truancy is the proper word. And yeah, I gave the wrong impression in that video, that it was like as if I just kind of turned up one day and was a bit of an idiot in one class and then she was like out. But
uh,
that's not like, it was going on 3 years at this point, because I'd actually studied it in year 9, year 10, year 11, and year 12. And year 9 was the only year that I wasn't like a total idiot in it. And like, um, particularly one student and I had this whole like sort of game that we played by ourselves, or like where we just weren't there to study German at all. um, and it just became this snowball effect where it's like we started associating German class with like the time that we had fun and played our little kind of game that we'd made up. Um and my German never ever progressed, and the class was on to some like pretty serious stuff by this point, because she was actually quite a good teacher.
mm,
And she believed in less traditional approaches. She believed more in like watching German movies and
wow.
speaking a lot, which is okay. Maybe I don't agree with that now, but like it's better than what they do in school, which is like, this is a verb, this is a noun. And so
Mm,
we were expected to know all that stuff by then. Ich bin, du bist. You meant to know, like that was meant to be down pat. And the top students had it down. They spoke actually pretty good German.
wow.
The two top students. I mean, not like really good, but
As far as high school is expected.
exactly. They could read in German, for example, like read a basic novel kind of thing. And I could barely even say that I spoke German for real. Um, and so it was ongoing for many years that I just came to class as a show, really. And yeah, one day she just kind of said, "Look, you're not, you're only taking away from others' progress." And
Wow.
she was like, why you just not come?" Like, and it was totally a choice. She didn't say like you can't come.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it made total sense. But it didn't actually last because I forget exactly why, but like I had to be somewhere in the school grounds during that time.
Right.
And so teachers would be like, "You don't have a free period right now, Lamont. Like, what are you doing?" And then I couldn't kind of dob her in and say, "Well, she gave me permission to just
Uh-huh.
not come to class," because that would get her in massive trouble. So I was always ducking it, and I was like, "Oh, fine. I just go back to class and I just won't disturb anyone." Uh, and I also got a bit of a kick of motivation towards the end of like right towards the end of final year, when I was supposed to have like known all my stuff. I
Uh-huh.
actually did put in some effort uh, in German only, really. So this wasn't just German, by the way. This is all my classes. I did not give a crap about school at all. Like I
Oh
was a
wow.
terrible student. So
I would have thought the complete opposite, because basically I was that person too. What you just described, I was that
yeah,
person. I had classes that I liked and that I did fairly well at, but then there were
yeah,
classes like math that just like, all right, what's that? Forget it. Don't like it. And I did really terrible.
yeah, yeah. I mean, music was the one that I paid the most attention in. Uh, but even that was like new for me, and because actually, yeah, I'd never been into it. I hadn't properly played music or anything before that, and that was kind of my obsession back then. That was my thing that I was into, was music, and that's what I ended up going to do at university.
What instrument?
Um, at the time, I played guitar and piano.
Wow.
I got I hadn't learned piano, but I got really obsessed with it, like again, which meant that it quickly overtook my guitar just because of how much effort I put in, um, despite having never had lessons or anything. And I was wrongly, incorrectly seen as like a freak because people are like, you haven't had lessons, you're like amazing, and
Oh
it's
my.
like, yeah, but I do this for like 5 hours a day. Like, like whenever I'm not at school, I'm playing piano, and often when I am at school, I'm in a practice room playing piano as well. Um, yeah, and then so I did at uni, but I actually did composition at uni, so I didn't have to play
Okay.
anything because compared to like a properly trained musician from like who starts from like 5 years old, I was rubbish at piano and still am. Like I'm good enough to look like, oh, he plays piano, but any proper pianist is like, not really.
I got you.
Yeah.
Oh, you said something interesting about like the fact that you would always find a new thing. I was wondering how many like new things you had, because for me, I would say that I was the complete opposite. I'm like the kind of guy that finds one thing and like I go all in. So like from 13 to 22, my thing was being a distance runner, and
Hmm.
in that time, I had a really nice progression, really nice. And basically, I started as like a kid who, probably had some, a bit of talented, just a bit, but more of a product of working hard. And by the time the end of my career came, I was the best on my, let's say, cross country team. My final year at a Division I university, which is, in American collegiate athletics, that's the highest one. So
Mm.
just to give you an idea of my timeline.
Yeah, yeah.
And after that, I started like writing poetry. I'm like, huh, these would actually make good song lyrics. So I'm like, let me learn the guitar. And that became like my thing up until 2014 when I moved to Mexico. Then all of a sudden, languages became that thing.
Okay.
So I
Yeah.
would say that I've had like three kind of real big passions in my life.
Yeah, I wish I'd held anything for that long. In school, mine were generally 2 years, and probably in my 20s, they were like 3 years. And now I'm sort of trying to find ways to almost trick myself into, and sorry if you can hear my son in the background, but I'm trying to find ways to trick myself into holding something out for longer. So thankfully now my Swedish is at a level where I can explore other things in Swedish. So
Excellent.
I'm almost kind of trying to find a new like and a new topic of interest, but in Swedish, so
Of
that
course.
I'm actually trying to get to a level in one thing where I could be more articulate about that in Swedish than I am in English. Because, like, I've never talked about XYZ in English,
Of course.
but I still haven't found that thing. So,
So my first real question is, there's many stories of people like that, of not having success in high school language classes, and even their teachers telling them very demotivating things. Like there's many cases of this. Do you think in your case, there was a bit of that came back around when you did decide to learn the language? That you're like, oh, this experience in high school, and all of a sudden you're like, no, I want to show myself that I can learn a language. I'm not garbage. That, you know.